responses to the willingness to lead framework, and how we, like, ways we could apply that, ways we could think about applying that to our own work, and inviting the students to do the same, to think about, can this work for us? Can we apply this in our context? How does it mean? What does it mean to us? So we'll play it to you, and then we'll hopefully have a slightly more detailed discussion about aspects of the framework and EAP leadership. So hope you can hear this okay.
Yes.
So press play.
Yeah. So I start with the personal layer, and then Irene goes more into the organisational and professional layers of the willingness to lead. Right. Okay. Let's see if this works.
Willingness to lead framework.
Hello, it's Irene.
And it's Jodie.
And welcome to the second podcast episode of the module.
We're talking today about the willingness to lead framework devised by Reinders to consider leadership in our own contexts. If you remember, the framework is based on something called the theory of planned behaviour by Asgen, which Reinders places alongside a typology of three different aspects: personal, organisational and professional.
So we've gone away and thought about this separately. We've been considering it from slightly different perspectives, and we don't actually really know what each other's going to say. So, Jodie, how did you approach the framework?
Yeah, so I approached it from the point of view of being a module lead at the moment, and I considered more of the personal layer of the willingness to lead framework and how it intersects with the behavioural beliefs and the normative beliefs part of the theory of planned behaviour.
Okay, so I also thought about it from module leadership perspective, but not for myself. I imagined someone who was thinking about whether they would want to be a summer module leader and how they would approach that and what the thoughts they might have. And I tried to map that onto the framework to see what it told me about how their feelings and approaches might affect their willingness to lead.
Really interesting, yeah.
If I can explain that.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to talk a bit about what you reflected on and what you found?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, I was considering more of the personal layer because it's a little bit of a kind of reflection and evaluation of what I've been doing at the Language Centre in that foundation year context. And I think when considering that personal part of the Reinders typology as intersecting with the behavioural beliefs, I think I can speak to the fact that role models have played a part in this. So interestingly, I've been on a bit of a journey of observing different leadership. And I think sometimes what I've observed to be good leadership over the last 5 years working at my centre, I have tried to incorporate this into my own habits for leading while challenging my own assumptions in the meantime. And to give an example of what I mean, before starting on this journey to being a module leader and to thinking about it and reflecting on my position within that, I believe that a module leader needed to be a quite strong authority, capable of, instilling what I now understand to be more of a transactional leadership style. But I've found that in reality, in smaller teams, a more distributed style of leadership can work by giving agency to team members. But again, this might depend on the situations and the participants and how they regard their own willingness to lead within that particular situation. So to expand on that a bit more, I think where the personal part of the typology intersects with normative beliefs and even attitudes towards behaviour, I think it includes sometimes how I've found aligning external demands with internal aspirations a little bit tricky. So my example is assessment change, which is happening at the moment. I have found that, it's demanded constant reflection and reflexivity, to take into account my own strengths and weaknesses and where I need to, perhaps stand back and let others take the lead on occasion, but also where I need to show actually, okay, this is where we've got to go, partly because of the external demand, but where have we got agency and where can we shape this? Where have we got that, decision-making power? So, yeah, I am being a bit challenged by that at the moment as we adjust this, but, it's responding not just to our language centre, but to institutional, societal, technological change at that macro level as well, I think.
So do you see yourself you might not be able to answer this, but do you see yourself anywhere particular in that framework? What in that framework has helped with those reflections, or?
Yeah, I think it is by taking into account, as I said, the personal, but also what is perceived as normative behaviour.
Right, that's really interesting.
I think it's that where I said previously, I thought, okay, a good leader can tell someone what to do and then people will be influenced by that and do it. But actually, that's not necessarily the perceived normative within our language centre.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think my ideas have shifted around what good leadership can be.
That's so interesting.
According to the willingness to lead framework.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So Irene, how did you think about the willingness to lead framework?
Sort of some similarities and some differences. If I imagine someone who is thinking that they might want to take on a role of module leadership in the summer, which is, quite a big and important role. So I thought, what might be on the first row? What might be their behaviour belief? So the behaviour belief, which is what's the likelihood that this behaviour will produce a particular outcome? So what's likely to happen if I become module lead? And I imagined someone who was saying, and I've heard a lot of people express this feeling, okay, actually being a summer module leader might mean I end up with actually a lot more work. There might be a lot of stress. There might be a lot of admin that doesn't give me time to do things I like. So that's their kind of starting fear or belief, I guess. And as I say, that's something that I think people have expressed about module leader quite with some validity. And then I thought, okay, so then we look down to what the attitudes towards the behaviour are. So how much of being a module leader is actually perceived positively or negatively? And then for me, I thought that might switch for that person. So on the one hand, they're saying, actually, I'm fearful of being module leader because of all those reasons. But actually, I do see some intrinsic value in that role. I do kind of want to do it. It might give me more personal autonomy. It might improve my career prospects, all sorts of reasons. So actually, although there's this initial fear of what you might have to do, there's also a balance to that. And then on the normative belief, what is the pressure to engage in that behaviour? I think the pressure is fairly neutral in the language centre. So I think this person might think it's desired. People want me to do it. People are enthusiastic about me doing it, but I don't have to do it. There's not a massive pressure to do it. If I don't want to do it, I don't have to. So there isn't too much pressure on that person in this situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And that's really interesting to consider how in other workplaces that might not be the norm or normative belief. It's a very interesting observation.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because somewhere else the normative belief might be either you must do this or there's no encouragement to do it, kind of thing. So I kind of imagine those three things. And then if you look at the organisational on the first row, actually, with this fear about there might be loads of extra work to do and loads of admin, at the organisational level, we can say, well, there are engaged programme leads for our summer. There's a lot of people invested in the summer. There's quite a lot of support. And actually, the Language Centre is currently tackling some of the communication challenges that might have led to that fear. So when you balance those things together, you're like, actually, there's the initial, this behaviour might produce this, but actually around that, in the attitude to the behaviour, in the normative beliefs, in the organisational behaviour beliefs, it begins to be more positive.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of seeing that as, okay, that initial belief might not be enough to disincentivize someone from taking that role. If the organisational support was less, if the normative beliefs were different, it might be a different outcome.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
So it is about almost the willingness to lead framework has helped us to see how these different components influence individuals in the choices they make.
Yeah, it was kind of like, oh, this is quite valuable. And also it's interesting because you might still end up with module leaders who feel there is actually a lot of extra work. There is a lot of admin, but all of those other more positive things keep them in place. And if you had somebody who, you could have somebody who started with a more positive take on it, like, oh, I really want to be a module leader. I'm really going to get a lot out of that. If the other organisational things weren't in place, they might fail at that, or they might not have the opportunity to do it. Yeah. So that was my kind of journey through the willingness to lead framework.
Yeah, and I think that's it. To bring that together, I suppose the aim of the framework is not to have strict categories per se. It's more to help us to use that model to explain and categorise observed phenomena within our leading context.
That was what I was trying to remember.
So I suppose for people who are listening, that's what we'd really like you to try and do as well. Not necessarily using the same parts of the framework that we did. You might use that as a starter and go on. You might want to fill out the whole of the box and see what elements might influence people and their decisions about leadership in your particular context. Or you might choose to look at one area of the typology, as I did in this instance, the personal layer.
Because this is about teachers, isn't it? Teacher leadership, specifically, teacher leadership. And obviously we're one section of teacher leadership, potentially. So, yeah. Great.